The Wolfman from 1941 gave us the full moon, silver bullets, and a curse that never lets go. But the real terror lived behind the camera. Lon Chaney Jr. was tortured by his makeup artist, a 600-pound bear nearly killed the leading lady, and a refugee screenwriter poured his trauma from Nazi Germany into a monster myth that felt ancient. What you're about to hear isn't folklore. It's the disturbing truth of how one of Universal's most iconic horrors was really made. Fact 1. The makeup was torture. Jack Pierce's wolf makeup wasn't movie magic so much as a daily trial. Lon Chaney Jr. reported to the chair before dawn and sat 5 to 6 hours while Pierce glued yak hair to his face, strand by strand, then singed it with a hot curling iron until the room reeked of burnt hair. That was before the day's scenes even started. At night, removal meant solvents on already irritated skin and Pierce peeling away gum and hair like a second face. This routine repeated for weeks, leaving Chaney raw, exhausted, and dreading the chair more than the camera. On screen, Larry Talbot becomes a monster in seconds. Off-screen, Chaney endured a slow transformation built on heat, glue, and pain. Proof that the most convincing horror sometimes happens just out of frame. Fact 2. Lon Chaney was haunted by his father's legacy. Before he ever became the Wolfman, Lon Chaney Jr. carried a curse of his own, his last name. His father, Lon Chaney Sr., was the man of 1,000 faces, one of the most revered actors in silent film history. But when the elder Chaney died in 1930, the son inherited more than a famous name. He inherited impossible expectations. Universal executives constantly compared him to his father, often behind his back. Makeup artist Jack Pierce reportedly told crew members that Chaney Jr. would never be his old man. That pressure consumed him. He began drinking heavily and wrestling with insecurity, terrified he'd never live up to the legend that came before him. When the Wolfman finally made him a star, it wasn't a triumph, it was a release. He'd finally escaped his father's shadow by becoming a monster all his own. Fact 3. The makeup was originally rejected. The Wolfman's look was born years earlier and tossed aside. In 1935, for The Werewolf of London, Jack Pierce designed a full bestial transformation, but star Henry Hull refused to bury his features under that much hair. The studio compromised, Pierce shelved the design, and it gathered dust until 1941. When The Wolfman was greenlit, Pierce pulled the original plan and finally unleashed it, this time on Lon Chaney Jr., who didn't have Hull's clout to say no. The choice defined werewolf cinema. Hull kept a recognizable face. Chaney disappeared beneath fur and fangs, becoming the template for every movie wolf that followed. Rejection turned into revelation, and Pierce's too much became exactly right. Fact 4. The transformation took nearly 10 hours to film. Those mesmerizing dissolves where Chaney sprouts hair and turns feral look effortless, but each second's long beat consumed a full day. The team locked the camera, Chaney froze in position, Pierce added a layer of hair, and they rolled a few frames. Stop. More hair. Roll again. Any twitch meant starting over. Hour after hour, the makeup thickened while Chaney held a statue stillness and the crew captured the incremental nightmare. By wrap, he'd spent 10 to 12 hours for a moment you'd miss if you blinked. That transformation isn't just a trick of editing, it's a time lapse of patience and pain, compressing a day's worth of work and a man's endurance into a single, unforgettable metamorphosis. Fact 5. Chaney and Pierce grew to hate each other. By the end of production, the makeup room felt like a battlefield. Chaney complained of burning solvents, torn skin, and the nightly dread of removal. Pierce insisted the art demanded it and refused to soften his methods. Crew avoided their clashes when tempers flared, but contracts and box office tied them together. They returned for sequels, repeating the same grueling dance because the result was bigger than either man's pride. A monster that lived and breathed on camera. The irony is perfect for a tragedy like Larry Talbot's. Two men locked in a curse of their own making, suffering each other to bring a legend to life. Fact 6. Claude Rains was an absurd choice for Chaney's father. Claude Rains was a brilliant actor, but casting him as Lon Chaney Jr.'s father made absolutely no sense. Rains was 52. Chaney was 35, only a 17-year age gap. Rains was short, refined, and British. Chaney was tall, broad, and rough-edged. On screen, they looked more like distant cousins than father and son. Critics even joked about the mismatch, yet praised Rains for his ability to sell the role through pure performance. Universal didn't care about realism, they wanted prestige. Rains had name recognition, and his presence gave the picture class. So, despite the physical absurdity, Universal paired the scholarly Englishman with the burly American and hoped audiences wouldn't notice. They did, but they forgave it because Rains' gravitas made the impossible believable. Fact 7. Bela Lugosi desperately wanted the lead role. Before Lon Chaney Jr. ever howled at the moon, Bela Lugosi wanted to be the one doing it. By 1941, Lugosi's stardom had dimmed. 10 years after Dracula, he was struggling for good roles, haunted by his decision to reject Frankenstein's monster, the part that made Karloff a legend. So when The Wolfman came along, Lugosi saw it as redemption. He begged Universal for the lead, but the studio wanted fresh blood, literally. They gave the part to Chaney and threw Lugosi a consolation prize, a brief role as Bela the Gypsy, the werewolf who curses Larry Talbot. He appears for only minutes before dying. Chaney's career skyrocketed. Lugosi's continued to fall. By the end of his life, he was buried wearing Dracula's cape, a symbol of the one role Hollywood never let him outlive. Fact 8. Chaney was promoted from playing a dog. Lon Chaney Jr. wasn't Universal's first choice for the Wolfman. He wasn't even cast as a human at first. The original lead was actor Dick Foran, while Chaney was hired to play the actual wolf that attacks Jenny Williams in the woods. Just days before filming, Foran dropped out, and the studio scrambled. Chaney was already under contract, so they bumped him up from four-legged animal to leading man, almost overnight. The irony? They still used Chaney's own German Shepherd, Moose, for the wolf attack scenes. So technically, both Chaney and his dog made it into the movie. One went on to become a Universal legend, the other just earned a biscuit and a day's pay. Fact 9. The censors demanded the Wolfman look human. Ever wondered why the Wolfman walks upright instead of on all fours? You can thank the censors. In the 1940s, the Production Code Administration set strict rules on what horror could show. They decided that turning a man into a true animal was too disturbing, too primal for audiences. So they ordered Jack Pierce to keep the Wolfman recognizably human. He had to walk on two legs, have a human face, and avoid looking too beast-like. Even transformation shots showing a full change were banned, forcing editors to rely on dissolves and jump cuts. The result wasn't Pierce's original vision, but it gave us an iconic image, a man half-trapped between humanity and savagery. Ironically, censorship made the creature more haunting, not less. Fact 10. Chaney's dressing room was taken as punishment. The feud between Lon Chaney Jr. and Evelyn Ankers started long before the cameras rolled, and it began with a drunken mistake. Before filming, Chaney vandalized studio property during a late-night bender, and Universal punished him by taking away his dressing room. They reassigned it to Ankers, who had nothing to do with the incident. When Chaney found out, he blamed her personally, convinced she'd stolen it from him. From that moment, hostility simmered. Crew members said he growled insults under his breath whenever she passed. Around the lot, people joked that Chaney wasn't just playing a monster, he was becoming one. For Ankers, that stolen dressing room turned into a curse of its own, marking the start of a shoot she'd later describe simply as a nightmare. Fact 11. A 600-pound bear escaped and nearly killed Evelyn Ankers. The scariest moment on the Wolfman set didn't involve makeup or monsters. It involved a live bear. Universal had rented a 600-pound trained bear for a scene where the Wolfman would wrestle the animal, but trained turned out to be wishful thinking. During setup, the bear escaped, panicked, and charged straight toward Evelyn Ankers. Terrified, she ran and scrambled up a ladder while the bear clawed at the rungs beneath her. An electrician working in the rafters reached down and pulled her to safety just in time. After the chaos, Universal cut the scene completely, deciding the risk wasn't worth it. Some of the bear footage survived only in the trailer. Evelyn Ankers escaped unhurt, but she'd never forget that a werewolf film almost became her obituary. Fact 12. Ankers was also terrorized by her co-star. After surviving the bear, Evelyn Ankers faced a new predator, her leading man. Lon Chaney Jr. held a grudge because Universal had given her his old dressing room. To get revenge, he began stalking her on set in full Wolfman makeup. He'd sneak up behind her in the fog, growl, or grab her shoulder when she'd least expected it. This wasn't playful, it was deliberate intimidation. Crew members saw it but looked the other way. This was 1941, long before Hollywood had HR departments or safety coordinators. Ankers later said she had a rough time on that production, which was her polite way of describing weeks of fear and harassment. Between a rampaging bear and an unpredictable co-star, it's a miracle she didn't run for the hills. Fact 13. Ankers passed out in the fog machine smoke. The foggy climax of The Wolfman might look eerie and poetic, but filming it nearly killed Evelyn Ankers. Universal filled the set with thick, chemical-based fog to create that misty forest atmosphere. It looked great on camera, but it wasn't safe to breathe. During one take, Ankers suddenly collapsed, vanishing into the dense smoke. The crew, assuming the scene was over, began packing up equipment without realizing she was still on the floor, unconscious. A technician finally stumbled across her and called for help. She'd been out cold for several minutes, overcome by fumes. After a quick checkup, the studio sent her right back to finish the scene. No shutdown, no safety inspection, just lights, camera, action. The show, as always, had to go on. Fact 14. The original script left the transformation ambiguous. Screenwriter Curt Siodmak originally wrote The Wolfman as a psychological thriller, not a creature feature. In his first draft, it's never clear whether Larry Talbot actually transforms into a wolf, or only believes he does. The murders could have been psychological, not supernatural. Universal executives hated that idea. You can't have a monster movie without a monster, they said, demanding visible fangs, fur, and claws that could be marketed on posters. Siodmak rewrote the script, giving the studio their literal transformation. The subtle exploration of madness was lost, replaced by clear, physical horror. But in a way, both ideas survived. The Wolfman's curse still feels like a metaphor for inner torment, buried beneath all that yak hair. Fact 15. The famous werewolf poem was completely made up. It sounds ancient, like true folklore whispered across generations. But that famous poem? Even a man who is pure in heart and says his prayers by night? Completely fake. Screenwriter Curt Siodmak invented it entirely for The Wolfman, crafting words that felt centuries old even though they came from a typewriter in 1941. Audiences believed it instantly. For decades, books and documentaries quoted it as genuine gypsy or Eastern European legend. It became so famous that people forgot it was Hollywood dialogue. In a strange twist, fiction turned to folklore. The poem entered popular culture and became real through repetition, a piece of cinematic mythology that escaped its own movie and took root in the real world. Fact 16. The script was influenced by Nazi Germany. Curt Siodmak didn't just write The Wolfman as fantasy, he wrote it out of fear. A Jewish refugee who fled Nazi Germany, Siodmak poured his trauma directly into Larry Talbot's curse. Like Siodmak, Talbot is an innocent man marked by forces beyond his control, hunted, feared, and doomed to hurt others simply for what he's become. Even the pentagram that appears on victims mirrors the Yellow Star Jews were forced to wear. Through a monster movie, Siodmak transformed his own persecution into metaphor, turning personal pain into universal myth. The Wolfman isn't just about transformation, it's about what happens when society decides who the monster is. Fact 17. Chaney played the Wolfman more than any other monster. No other Universal monster belonged to a single actor like the Wolfman belonged to Lon Chaney Jr. Between 1941 and 1948, he reprised Larry Talbot in 4 sequels. Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula, and Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. While Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, and the Mummy all changed faces over the years, Chaney kept returning to the same tragic role. He called it My Baby. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was penance, but every time he endured Jack Pierce's brutal makeup routine, he added another layer to the myth. The Wolfman wasn't just his character, it was his legacy. Fact 18. Gibson Gowland witnessed both Cheneys die. Character actor Gibson Gowland has a unique claim in horror history. He watched both Lon Chaney Sr. and Lon Chaney Jr. die on screen. 16 years before The Wolfman, Gowland appeared in The Phantom of the Opera during the elder Chaney's climactic death scene. Then, in 1941, he played a villager present for the younger Chaney's fatal transformation. 2 different eras, 2 legendary deaths, 1 silent witness bridging them. It's as if Universal unintentionally recorded the passing of a torch from father to son, from silent tragedy to talking terror, through a single extra who happened to stand in the right place twice. Fact 19. The church came from Lon Chaney Sr.'s most famous film. The stone church that anchors the Wolfman wasn't built for it at all. It was lifted straight from the Hunchback of Notre Dame, 1923, where Lon Chaney Sr. had played Quasimodo. Nearly 2 decades later, his son performed his own monster role on those same steps. Critics even noticed the architecture looked too grand for a small Welsh village. They were right. It was literally Notre Dame. Universal's habit of reusing sets accidentally created cinematic poetry. The son's tortured creature walking the same stones that made his father immortal. 2 Cheneys, 2 monsters, 1 sacred stage. Fact 20. It released 2 days after Pearl Harbor. Timing nearly doomed The Wolfman. It opened December 9, 1941, just 2 days after Pearl Harbor. Universal feared no one would pay to be scared when the country was already terrified. But audiences came anyway. They needed escape, and Chaney's doomed anti-hero gave them one. Against all odds, the film became one of Universal's biggest hits of the era, proving that even in wartime, people still sought the catharsis of monsters. The Wolfman's howl echoed through America's darkest moment, and somehow made the darkness bearable. The Wolfman defined werewolf mythology for generations, turning pain, superstition, and tragedy into timeless horror. Behind every howl was real sweat, real fear, and the kind of filmmaking that can't be duplicated today. If you enjoyed uncovering the dark secrets behind this classic, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Tell us which horror legend, monster movie, or forgotten cult classic you want to see next. Because on this channel, every film has a story hiding in the shadows.